The Indiana General Assembly seems poised to pass legislation that would allow private employers to give preferences to veterans similar to the preferences allowed in the public sector. It seemed like a good time to look at the issues of unemployment among Indiana veterans. To talk about it, we have Bob Carnagey, who is a veterans employment specialist who works with the Indiana National Guard. Bob, welcome.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Sure. So, recent testimony before the Indiana General Assembly listed the unemployment rate for post 9/11 veterans nationwide at about 9%, which is pretty high in and of itself. But in Indiana, it's 16.9%. So it's incredibly high in Indiana. Does that mirror your experience, what you're seeing out there?
Absolutely. We've seen numbers even higher than that from time to time. I think that it's a mixture of, one, there's so many National Guardsmen in the state of Indiana, and two, that means the number of what I would call less experienced or young folks who've come right out of high school and gone into the Guard without a lot of advanced training is a larger number.
So you've got a lot of young veterans now because the National Guard got a lot younger over the last 12 years or so.
Absolutely.
All right. But, I mean, everybody says they want to hire veterans. I mean, I'd be hard-pressed to find an employer who would come out and say, no, I don't want to hire veterans. So this seems like, in many ways, like this be an incredibly easy task.
Sometimes I feel it is. You make a phone call and all of a sudden they just open up like a flower and say, what do you have? Send them over, and those kinds of things. But it also means that the skill sets have to be right also. They're just not going to hire anybody who walks in the door. So because they have less experience, we've got to help them understand how to translate that military experience into civilianese.
So when you talk about somebody who has no experience because they're a young veteran, but in fact they actually have a lot of skills that probably would translate to a lot of different employers.
Absolutely, that's correct. They're running some very large pieces of equipment or heavy machinery, et cetera, and it may not be the same thing that's in that business or in that industry, but certainly demonstrates their ability to learn how to do it.
But there are some companies that there's a certain trepidation that they don't want to hire veterans. There's a certain fear out there. Have you run across that at all?
Yes, you can tell when you have conversations with people. They may tell you yes, but you've got to have a really, like a bow and arrow, to get the right person in the right location, because if there's any wavering from the skill set, they're not going to be as cooperative as it may seem. And sometimes there's hidden agendas. Sometimes it's just obvious that you need that skill set to work on this job.
So you've seen some roadblock. And why do you think that is? Why do you think that reluctance is there?
Well, I think that sometimes our soldiers are not prepared to have that kind of dialogue like you and I are having right this minute in a career perspective, because they haven't been in that before. Their experience to get into the Guard wasn't nearly this type of a give and take. And so they can't articulate as well as they should. And so that's one of the things we do is help coach them. And then we have those employers who are extremely reluctant. Even though they may say yes, they are reluctant and have fears in the back of their mind.
Fears in their back of their mind. Now, on radio a couple weeks ago, we had a researcher from Harvard who surveyed veterans from 1995 all the way through 2009 and found only 9% of them considered themselves disabled. But if you ask the federal government, they estimate that same group has about 29% disabled. So there's a real problem with underreporting. Even disabled veterans don't classify themselves as being disabled.
That's correct. And I think that there is a fear, a stigma, because it's the word disabled. I think that there should be a better descriptor. I think we have people that are physically disabled because they have serious injuries that cause loss of limb, et cetera, and then we have those who have hidden injuries that you don't see, and those are the ones who don't want to share the fact that they have a disability.
These are people with post-traumatic stress disorder, or maybe they have a TBI, traumatic brain injury, and it may not be visible from the outside.
That's correct. Or sometimes over time, because of exposures to different environments, there may be the development of a disease or a chronic illness that's spawned by that. And those folks find out later in life, in other words, they may be out of the military for multiple years, determine that the cause of that particular illness was something that they were exposed to 20 years ago. And they don't share that.
These are the people like, I didn't know this until recently, Agent Orange causes things like diabetes as you age.
I can tell you from personal experience that's 100% correct.
And so a lot of these people, they don't want to go out there. They don't want to tell a potential employer that they have this disability.
Absolutely correct, because they feel as though if I come to you and tell you I have this, this, and this, you may not hire me.
Yeah. But there are actual programs out there for disabled vets, and that they can take advantage, just like there are programs for anyone who is disabled.
That's correct. They would be getting 100% VA benefits and be able to go to all the VA doctors and clinics and hospitals, so the employer would have no involvement in the treatment for those things that are ailing that particular soldier or veteran, yet they don't want to express it for fear it will be a black mark against them at that company.
A black mark against that company. And, I mean, so what do you do? How do you overcome that?
They don't talk about it.
They don't talk about it.
They don't talk about it.
But the unemployment rate, and this is the same thing, the same study, the unemployment rate for disabled veterans is higher than the unemployment rate for other people who are disabled. So if you're a disabled veteran, you're probably more likely to be unemployed. And so obviously they're not taking advantage of some of the programs out there to help you become employed.
Right. I would say that that's probably maybe just a touch skewed, because there's a lot of those that fall into that disabled veteran that may be physically disabled, and so maybe they don't get as aggressive as they could, looking for maybe a special place where they could work because of the physical disabilities they may have. But, I think that it's lack of confidence sometimes from the veteran. I really do, because if they know they're suffering from something, they're fearful to go out and really get in the mainstream sometimes.
All right. So how do you overcome that?
Education. I think that first off, I know that for my own personal perspective, there are organizations that are geared specifically to that disabled American veteran. The one that comes to mind that I'm a member of, based in Northwest Indiana, is the Disabled American Veterans of America. And that the only way you become a member is because you have a VA rating. So somebody who's been in the service but doesn't have a VA rating cannot join that organization. And there, we have a very active group here in Northwest Indiana. There are probably 150, if not more, veterans that attend our meetings, and numerous of us have had conversations. We feel very much at home in that environment, because we don't have to be concerned about somebody looking at you in a different light, because everybody in the room is in the same environment.
Now, there are a couple different bills moving through the General Assembly. They've had pretty wide support. They're assuming that one of these is going to pass maybe within the next week or so, and it would allow, if you're a private employer, you can give a preference for veterans. I guess before you can do this at the federal level, they require you to do this at the state level. So Indiana wants to become one of those states that allows that preference. Do you think that's going to help?
Absolutely. I know that in the state of Indiana, the Lieutenant Governor's office has projects where they'd go visit companies around the state, encouraging them to become part of a program that allows the veteran to get a leg up. Doesn't give them a job. It gives them an opportunity. And it also educates the employer that they have a whole host of people in the pool that have some special skills, some special capabilities, and they become more cognizant of looking for that veteran when they're hiring.
Now, I would say Indiana is a pretty patriotic state. There's a very large National Guard here. There's no active duty military base. I would have think that this was a state that really understands the military pretty well, but in some ways, are they a little bit behind the curve?
Well, I can't compare with other states. I really can't. But I think part of what you said is right on, because if we were to go to, say, North Carolina or Texas or something like that, where they have very, very large installations of full-time soldiers, it's in the front of everyone's mind. And here in Indiana, the vast majority are National Guardsmen. So they're not employed all the time. It's a part-time situation. For the most part, there's a cadre at each unit, but it's very small compared to what happens on a drill weekend. So it's not up front, like it would be if we had a base with 10,000 soldiers at it. And I think that that's part of the situation.
Part of the situation, though, over the last 12 years or so, we had so many National Guardsmen participating in Iraq and Afghanistan. It's something that probably Indiana needs to stress a little more than they have.
I totally agree with that, because I don't know what the statistics are, be qualified to make a statement, but numerous units have been deployed of various disciplines, and these are the guys that, when they come back, they really need to be given an opportunity to step up. They want to step up. The companies need to give them that opportunity because they've sacrificed a lot.
Well, that's a good place to end right there. Bob Carnagey, he's a Veterans Employment Specialist. He works with the Indiana National Guard. Bob, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you for the opportunity to share our story.